Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. For those who are new, welcome. My name's Monica, and in today's video I'm going to be going through my favorite reads of 2024 by month. Okay, so I know I should have done this in December and stuff, but life was lifing and it was a thing, and let's just get into these because I've already done my top 15 books and you saw that last week. So any book that was on my top 15. So for those books, just refer to back to that video. I'm not going to spend all the time rehashing books that I've already talked in length about because I spent over an hour on that video and then I had to edit it down quite a bit because I was going through a lot. So let's just get into the books because that is why we're all here. So in January, my favorite book of that month was A House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J. Maas. This is book 3 in the Crescent City series. I had to think about that for a second because I could not remember it even though it's up there. So in this one, we get the ending to Bryson Hunt's story. I really liked the twists. I loved how everything was answered. I loved the world that Sarah J. Maas wrote in the Crescent City series. I really love Rune and Lydia. They by far stole this whole thing for me. I loved their romance so much, and I feel like they needed their own book. But I feel like what Bryce found out during her time in Asteri made a whole lot of sense from the very first book to the end. This is not strictly romantasy. There's some sci-fi in it, so I didn't mind that. I liked it. It kept my interest. I enjoyed the whole thing. I enjoyed the characters. And yes, they were very flawed. I like flawed characters. I don't like overly happy, simplistic characters. I like them down, dirty, bad, good, flawed, morally gray, whatever. I like them when they're interesting. And all the characters in here were interesting. Even if they were a little frustrating, they were still interesting. Now, so moving on to February. In February, my favorite book from that month was Ashes of You by Catherine Cowles. This one, I loved Lawson and Haley. I guessed the villain in this one. I was so excited for myself that I guessed the villain. I was like, oh yeah, But I loved the found family aspect. I loved that he saved her 5 years before the main story because she had escaped a serial unaliver. In present day, when the book is taking place, Haley goes to work for Lawson as his nanny. His son Luke was very much a teenager, and I appreciated the way she wrote Luke. So I understand the whole dynamic of Lawson and his 3 children. And I loved how Haley came in and was a breath of fresh air, and they worked really well together. And I still love that we have that shadow of what happened to Haley 5 years ago, and it comes into play in this book, and the way she was protective over Lawson and his boys. This one is fantastic. So I love this book, and it was going to be on my favorite list until I read the Sparrow Falls series, so there you go. So let's just move on to March. So in March, my favorite book that I read is on my top 15, and that is The Lightkeeper by Dr. Rebecca Sharp. So this one, he has PTSD. From 2 different events that happened in his life. She is a marine biologist in this grumpy sunshine, and he very much encloses himself in the lighthouse, and she gets permission to go there and do some research for her job. And I love it. I love that book so much. It's extremely emotional. I loved it. I highly recommend it, and that's why it was on that list. So no more than that. Let's move on to April. In April, my favorite book that I read was Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. That was also on my top 15 books of 2024. And you can refer back to the video, but let me just put it this way. I loved the setup of the characters, how they met. I loved the character growth. I loved it was very much therapy positive, and I just loved the whole entire book. It was just a fantastic book. Is it my favorite Abby Jimenez book? No, but I still loved it immensely. Now in May, my favorite book was Fragile Sanctuary by Catherine Cowles. That's on my 15 favorite books in 2024. So that is Anson Hunt, who we met in Ashes of You, and he is an ex-FBI profiler. And then we have Rhodes, who is fixing up her family's old house when it burnt down when she was a teenager. Later on she goes and fixes it up, and Shep is her foster brother, but they're more like a found family, so she considers Shep her brother, and Anson is his best friend. And it's best friend done right, because nobody's a jackass in that book. And I loved the romantic suspense, and so it's on that list, and you can hear more of my thoughts in that video. So let's just move on to June. In June, Love Unwritten by Lauren Asher was my favorite read of that month, and I absolutely loved that book. I love Rafa as a character, the way he groveled and pined for Ellie, and Ellie's character growth, and the love that she had for Nino, who is Rafa's son. Loved it. Want to know more of my thoughts? Go to that video. It's linked down below. So let's move on to July. Play Along by Liz Tomforty. Again, it was in my top 15 books. I loved this book. It is my favorite book in the Windy City series, and I love our hero in that he's such a sweet character. And I love Kennedy. She was a very strong character. Even though she was icy, she was extremely strong. I loved her, their dynamic together. I loved the themes that Liz Tomforty explored in that book, and I absolutely just loved the whole entire book itself. The plotting was perfect. The characterization and the character growth was perfect. I cannot just not gush about that book. It is fantastic. It's also in my top 15 books in 2024, so you can watch that video. Moving on to August, Beating Heart by Laura Pavlov. This one again was in my top books of 2024, and this one is my favorite in the Magnolia Falls series. My favorite in the Magnolia Falls series was for a very long time Loving Romeo, but then I just really loved Beating Heart because I loved Emmy and I loved Nash's growth as a couple and independently, and I loved Beefcake and how he is. Like, Beefcake is the star of that series. But again, you want my full thoughts, go watch that video, because I don't want to keep repetitively talking about the same books. Now in September, my favorite book that I read in September was Wild Eyes by Elsie Silver. So this was not on my top 15 books, okay? This one is the second book in the Rose Hills series. I love this one. It's West and Skylar's story. She is a country singer going through a really tough time because she didn't have a foundation, a loving foundation, because her mother and her father were basically managers instead of parents, and the way they used her was just grotesque. And then you have her trying to relate to other people through her social media content. Skylar meets West when she is trying to relate to her viewers by going up to a mama grizzly bear, didn't really see the cubs, and West was like, "What are you doing, woman?" And it was really good. He's a single dad, and he's so devoted to his kids and his horse farm, and I loved that she actually ended up living in the bunkhouse until he moved her into their house. It was a well-developed, well-written love story. The plotting was perfect. The characterization was really well done. I loved everything about this book, and I highly recommend this one. This Elsie Silver can write really good small town angsty romances. She's really good at it. So I do recommend this one as well. Moving on to October. Top book in October was If You Need Me by Helena Hunting. This is book 3 in the Toronto Terror series. This one, it was enemies to lovers, except that he wasn't really her enemy. He loved the crap out of that woman, and he pined for her. Her nickname is Hemi. She was the PR person. She's a badass. Okay, I absolutely love her. And she knew Dallas, who was our hero, since they were in high school. She thought he had done stuff, which he actually didn't do, but she literally held that against him for a very long time and would torture him in her professional life. Like, she would make him do all these charity things, like working with clowns and stuff, and and balloon animals. And anyhow, they're going to go back to their high school reunion, and she needed a date, and he was like, well, I'm available. And they get compromised, and for which would have been a PR nightmare, and Dallas could have lost his spot on the hockey team. So they pretended to fake date, and he was like, I'm gonna shoot my shot. This is my time to make her mine. And I absolutely loved it. I loved this book from beginning to end. I love both of them. The character growth in this is fantastic. Dallas learned to rein in his impulsivity, and I probably said that wrong. Impulsivity. That's how I say it. Anyway, and Hemi learns how to trust and to love Dallas and other people, because she works in a very toxic male environment, because it's a sports team. One of the guys in the PR department with her is a complete jackass. And I saw this with Liz Tomforty's book as well. They're talking about how women have it rougher in male-dominated sports franchises, where they literally have to suck up a lot more than what a man would have to. And it was something that Helena Hunting explored in If You Need Me, as well as Liz Tomforty explored in Play Along, and I loved the way they talked about it. And I highly recommend both of those books for very same reasons and very different reasons too. They're just both very good. So moving on to November, was my favorite in November was Darkest Sins by Neva El-Taj. This is book 9 in the Perfectly Imperfect series. That was also on my top 15 books of 2024, so you can watch that video. I absolutely loved it. It's just such a good book. Loved our psychopath stalker hitman guy, and she called him her little demon, and how she did anything she needed to do to keep herself and her child safe. Loved it. 5 stars, and I would absolutely recommend it. In December, we just finished December, my favorite book in that month that I read was All the Missing Pieces by Catherine Cowles. Listen, I could have put all of Catherine Cowles on the top 15 books, but I don't do that because I prefer to give it to one title from one author. I don't like to repeat authors because I feel like that's unfair. So this one is about Ridley, who's a true crime podcaster, and she's visiting Shady Cove. Something happened to her twin sister when they were younger, and so she's looking for the answers of what happened to her sister, because her sister disappeared and was never discovered. Colt is the sheriff. He does not like her at all, because he feels like she is just out for a money grab and to exploit people in their trauma. And then he learns why she's there, right? And so I loved how he changed from wanting to shut her out to wanting to help her to falling in love with her. And it really was a hate to love, because she didn't like the way he was treating her, obviously, and because she has self-respect, but also she actually understood the way he was feeling, and so she understood why he was the way he was. So that's why it worked from the transition from hate to love. And the tension was just everything. The tension was so well done in this book, and the suspense plot, I was shocked to see who the villain was. Like, I could not believe who the villain was. I was like, oh my gosh, I could not believe who the villain was. I was like, what the heck? Like, Ashes of You, I guessed it. I had inclinations during the Sparrow Falls series. There's a couple, like, specifically, it was Delicate Escape. I had an inkling, and I was kind of right, but I wasn't 100% sure. Where I was 100% sure in Ashes of You, and I didn't completely guess it, but it made a lot more sense. But this one was like mind blown, shocked. Like, she did such a good job. She also put in a lot of red herrings, because we had the people in the town who were just doing bad things, because small towns doesn't mean that everybody doesn't have secrets, and that's sort of explored in this book. So I absolutely loved it. It's coming out January 7th, and you have to read this book. please read this book. Read all these books. These books are fantastic. I highly recommend them. That's why they're on this list. So those were my favorites for the month, for each month of 2024. And let me know if we had any in common. I would love to know. And if you have any recommendations, what was one of your favorite books that you read in 2024? Let me know down below. And if you made this far in this video and you want to let me know that you're here, but don't want to say anything, leave me a snowman emoji since we are now in January. And until next time, my friends, happy reading. Bye.